What's up, guys? And it looks like we're actually live again. Obviously, we have right now the co-host is going to be Pam, who's my girlfriend. She had her, well, basically wife at this point. Let's be honest. Um, but she just had her birthday stream yesterday. For those who were able to come out to there. And if our energy levels tonight seem a little lower than usual, I apologize. I will explain for those who are not following me and the channel on Twitter and have not been updated on what's been going on recently. But with that said, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our guests first before we get into the somber bits, and then we can go back into the fun bits after that. So first of all, I'd like to introduce, again, we have Pam here. Oh, God, no, it's this way. I'm not mirroring my camera anymore. Pam is over this way, and she is my co-host tonight because Ocean is busy. This is usually where you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Pam, also known as Rosiella Panda and Madame Neko, apparently. That's very recent, so I've just taken on that name. Um, my channel includes just a bunch of sad stuff about my life, and I plan to start vlogging at some point, but I don't know when I'm going to do that yet.
Eventually, she'll start uploading content.
It'll
But with,
probably happen when we move into the new house.
said Pam is very quiet. Oh, I see why. I see what's going on. Give me just a second, and I will fix that. I know what is wrong with Pam's audio. It is coming through the wrong side. Okay, Pam, try speaking again.
Hello.
All right, you should definitely be a lot more audible now. With that said, I also have guests Mrs. Snarky and Lady Unicorn, EJG. Lady Unicorn has a channel where, as far as I'm concerned, I don't know what she considers her channel, but I consider her the person who checks the skeptics. And then Mrs. Snarky also has a channel about her deconversion, some philosophy, and a few other things as well.
Howdy, y'all. Am I supposed to say something else? I have a channel. I do the stuff he said. Yeah.
I mean, he pretty did a good job of introducing people. Do we need to introduce ourselves after he introduced us?
I
gave nothing left to add.
I gave like a cursory glance's worth of information about your guys' channel. Come on, you know more about it than I do.
I'm Mrs. Snarky, and I do snark.
That's it. That's the stream, guys. Thank you so much.
For those who don't know,
everybody.
for those who don't know, Mrs. Snarky is also the wife of the godless Iowan, and I had the pleasure of both filming and editing their wedding video, and I have no idea why they decided that was a good idea to let me do that. That was a bad idea, guys.
Oh, you did a great job. You did a wonderful job. We appreciate it.
So, with that said, how's everybody doing in the chat today? We've got 17 viewers right now. Again, energy levels are not going to be quite what they normally are, and that is unfortunately because last night, practically an hour after the stream we had with Pam, we found out that one of our cats had died. Nymphia was the runt of the litter. Gigi is the cat that I've had for about 7 years, and it was her daughter. She was the runt of that litter, and she had a habit of hiding all the time and has done so for the past year and a half. So her disappearing for a day or two at a time is pretty much just what she's done. We had removed the bottom part of our bed so she couldn't hide in the box spring, and had basically just systematically removed all hiding places in the house except for one, which we couldn't really remove, was under the recliner. Well, we were looking for my wallet yesterday, looked under the recliner, and unfortunately found that one of her favorite places to sleep also ended up being the last place she ever slept. So before we get into everything proper, if everybody is watching, if some of you are doing audio only right now, you won't be able to see it. But I am going to show for just a little bit some pictures of Nymphia, who was the cat that passed, because we miss her. And this is Nymphia sleeping when we actually were still moving everything around, getting everything in. That is her with her mom. They look almost identical. Anytime that we actually can get her there. You see, there's one with her mom. She's the one in front, and her mom's right behind her. They're almost identical. She is the spitting image there. And so we did not scare Ocean off with the Ocean meeting. Ocean is just planning to be busy.
She was an anxiety-ridden noodle, but she was a really good girl. and she had this thing where she hated being held, but like if you had your feet down, she would play with them, she would roll against them. And while she wasn't around all that often because she would go into hiding for days, it was still it's still going to affect us, and it's still going to be a very very big loss, because she was the baby, she was someone that we hand fed, that we held, that we tried to make sure she would always have a good life. And for the year and a half that we kept her alive, she was always fed, always happy.
And if she had not been fixed and Hylia had not been fixed, then they would have gotten together because he had been eyeing her ever since he gained the ability to.
Yeah.
But that's the end of the somber stuff. I just wanted to make sure that, one, you guys were updated. Anybody who is not on Twitter would not have seen that that was something that has happened. So that would be why the energy levels for today's stream are not going to be completely all the way there. But that out of the way, we can move into the more fun stuff, which is that today we're going to be talking about LGBTQ issues. There we go. Now, if I could actually learn how to speak properly, maybe we would not run into issues. So for anybody who's actually seen and been on my channel for a while, I've made a few, probably like 5 or 6, maybe more than that, very LGBTQ positive videos on my channel. But usually it's not a huge focus. It's just something that I have to footnote a lot because religious extremism does what it does. But that's why we wanted to bring in Lady Unicorn and Mrs. Snarky, because they have a lot more experience being part of that community, as well as Pam, because I am a white cis male, and my experience is all peripheral at best.
Real quick before we get into the discussion and everything, Iowan and Bud both say that you're echoing, so you might want to turn your gain down a little bit. I can't really do that on my mic.
It's not going to be gain that's the issue. It's the fact that they're hearing me through your microphone and my microphone.
Look, man, I can't help it.
Nope.
I got a shitty microphone. But with that being said, thank you so much, Lady Unicorn and Mrs. Snarky, for joining us today. When Sir said that he had an open spot on the channel, I kind of jumped at the opportunity, being as I am part of the LGBTQ plus community, and I know that very recently we had a little Snarky join. Go her.
Yes.
We're very happy to have her. And I just kind of want to like go through some bullet points and see what you guys think about it, and see like the main topics that are going on, specifically with the ACLU, because they do fight for LGBTQ plus rights, and they have like a whole system for it. So to start that off, we have the first one, and I think Mrs. Snarky is really going to like this one: LGBTQ parenting. So LGBTQ parenting normally includes insemination, adoption, foster parenting, surrogacy, previous heterosexual relationships. Starting off, how do you guys feel about specifically LGBTQ plus adopting and surrogacy? Because that's really the points of contention.
I really don't see where there's any point of contention. I mean, these are just people that want to have families. And
Yeah.
I don't understand the issue. Really, I don't see a problem with it. You know what I mean?
I think,
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, okay. I was just going to say, I think the only issue I've really heard anybody bring up is the concern about the lack of both mother and father. But when you're talking about especially the adoption, that's still far better than neither.
Yes.
Yep. Specifically for adoption and foster parenting, the points that we're going to be talking about is the 20-year fight from Florida that just recently ended. There was a 20-year-long legal battle between the ACLU and Florida's government because of an anti-gay adoption ban, stating that no two people of the same sex could adopt a child. It had to be one of each gender. And that recently got thrown out of the bush. They won that fight, and they state that they are also continuing the fight to allow LGBTQ people to have the option to adopt. And I think the only thing I see there is like there's two problems I see with LGBTQ plus adoption. One, you're going to get stuck in a loop of either go ask your mother, and second, endless dad jokes. I'm sorry. Those are the only two issues I see.
And
Go
both
ask
of
your
those,
mom. No, the other one.
and both of those are infinitely more tolerable than being stuck in any type of foster home. Also, Pam, I
Yes.
think I figured out what we're going to have to do to fix the audio issue.
Yeah, just the
Okay, cool. Then whenever you're speaking, I'll mute, and whenever I'm speaking, you'll mute, and then we'll be able to eliminate echo. Until we forget to do that.
Yeah. So one thing I did want to point out is that I don't really see, like, even when you have a heterosexual couple raising a kid, you're going to have problems as well. Like, especially if one of the parents is gay and they're in an unhappy relationship and stuff like that, and they feel that they have to be in this relationship to have kids. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, this is kind of, I would rather that, I'm one of those people that thinks that if kids are brought up in an unhappy home, then it's not good for the kids, you know? So,
And I would agree.
Yeah.
Specifically, I would agree that I would prefer everyone to have the right to have a child. Whether or not you can conceive one on your own or you have to adopt, I believe everyone should have the chance to have a child. And I believe that people that tell someone else that they can't have a child, they're speaking out of turn is the best way that I'm going to put it, because I'm a very violent person and I hate talk like that. But it's just one of those things where, like, it gives me a bad taste.
yeah, it ties into the whole pursuit of happiness, doesn't it?
Yeah, pretty much.
So it's basically a human right.
Yeah, you're basically
So-
trying to remove the parent's right to adopt because simply being gay doesn't automatically do anything against their parenting.
And I
then-
would.
I was going to say you're also removing the right of that child to be in a happy, loving home and forcing them to be in foster care because penis and butt is icky.
Yeah, exactly.
That's basically what it
that's
boils down to.
That's the exact point that I was about to bring up, was that the adoption system in America is so bad. It's just so non-involved.
Yeah.
And most of the time what happens through foster care is that a foster child will get sent to a home that will just use them and abuse them for the money that they bring in, for the extra hands around the house. It makes the child a slave. And I have read, and I know people, and I am one of those people. I was in a foster home for well over 6 months. That type of stuff can mess with you. Like, I would rather have a homosexual couple or whatever the fuck you are to just have that child and treat them lovingly, rather than give them to somebody that's going to take their money, take away all but one pair of clothes, and beat them. Like, I can't.
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. Like, there's not even really I don't even know of any real problems. The only thing I've ever heard of is, like I said, that one concern. It's like,
Right?
even if that were true, it'd still be so much better to have a child with 2 moms or 2 dads than to have a child with none.
Yeah, and that child ends up growing up, like, then you have the conflict. I'm gonna put in air quotes because it's not a conflict, but
Yeah.
the oh, well, he's gonna be influenced to be homosexual versus this child is going to be like, this child is going to have like mental issues. Like, I would rather, if the gay was contagious, I would rather my child be gay than be in an abused home.
Exactly,
Definitely.
because PTSD is like forever. I mean, it changes your neurochemistry for the rest of your life. And that is so ridiculous. How susceptible do they think kids are to sexuality in
Well,
that regard.
it's like the issue you have with anti-vaxxers, right? Like, if we ever grant that anti-vaxxers are right, and that autism does come from taking vaccines, then cool. You're saying you would rather have a dead kid than an autistic one. You'd
Yeah, I
rather
was
have
thinking of the same thing.
you'd rather have an abused kid than a gay one.
Right.
At some point, you have to realize that the logic that follows when you not just make a decision like that as an individual, but we're dealing with legislation. We're dealing with laws that affect people. When you have laws that act like that, what you end up having is a logical progression where you're saying death is worse than autism, or you're
Yep.
saying abuse is worse than homosexuality. It's a really
Actually, it'd be
awkward
the other
logical
way.
bind.
It'd be the
Yeah,
other way. You'd be saying.
he's meaning the other way. But
Yeah.
on that topic
Yes,
of
right.
like
Other way around.
legality and legal issues, I pulled up the next bulletin point, and it is transgender parents involved in child custody fights face baseless arguments that their transition threatens their children and is used and abused as a reason to restrict and deny custody and visitation.
See, I don't. The only issue that I could see with that is hormones. Like, we don't know how people would react to hormones, but that is even a long shot. That is
Very,
Yeah.
very, because like if that was going to be the problem, then wouldn't the opposite sex just automatically be that danger?
you would think.
We already agree that kids can be in homes with men and they can be in homes with women. So why would somebody going from one to the other suddenly pose a danger?
Not to mention, in those cases, the child custody cases, they need to be decided on unbiased assessment of the family's
Mhm.
circumstance and the individual needs of the child.
Yes.
But most of those cases are built off of myths about trans people and end up losing their rights to their children simply because they wanted to be who they were.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most heart-wrenching thing is when you have somebody that has this child but doesn't feel right in their own body, so they try to make everything better and they try to be who they are inside, and they end up having their kids taken away.
Right. And I think it poses much more of a danger if you have a parent who is going through was it body dysmorphia or depression, severe depression that one suffers whenever they don't feel like they're in the right body. So wouldn't it be much better for the child if they have a happy parent?
Yeah, I honestly would agree with that. Simply because, like, when you have someone with body dysmorphia, and then you have someone who's transitioning, when you see somebody else in the mirror, it makes you not be yourself. And it makes you put on this persona, and that persona might end up ruining your relationship with your child. Like, you may have like a great relationship with your child. They listen to you, you listen to them, you guys do everything. But the moment that you can no longer be yourself with your own child, at that point, you run the risk of abuse because now you're going to take it out on them. You run the risk of, abandonment. You run the risk of, that child growing up not thinking that they were good enough. Like, you run into a lot of risks because that mom or that dad can't be who they want to be. It's the same way like with drag. Like, a lot of people shit on dads that do drag because they want to feel sexy and like a woman. Like, I would much rather have a father that dressed in drag and took me out with his girlfriends than a dad who sat inside, in a recliner ready to beat me.
Or alternatively, no dad.
Yeah, or no dad.
Yeah.
Like,
That's another thing too. Oh, go ahead, Lady Unicorn.
Well, even if you don't have it, you don't even worry about the risk of like somebody becoming abusive or whatever, because obviously not everybody's going to go that route.
Yeah.
But even without that, it's still better to have somebody who is able to be, active and engaged and happy versus somebody who is just kind of existing.
Exactly. And, our children learn through mirroring and modeling what we do. And if we're modeling a presentation of ourselves that is not happy, that is not striving to be authentic, independent, autonomous, and happy, then what are we teaching our children? We're teaching our children to just accept things as they are, but not really, not authentically.
To just
And
do
kind of
whatever.
to
I think
settle for how other people see us instead of being who they really are. And I don't think that's healthy either. It
well,
really
like, and this is the greatest thing with this is the greatest thing. Like, I'm gonna bring up Little Snarky for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Little Snarky, when I came to visit you guys, Little Snarky told me that she wasn't ready, that she wasn't confident enough that she could come out and be who she wanted to be because she didn't know how she was going to be treated because of how she was being treated at school.
Yes.
I sat there and I had a conversation with her, and then you and I obviously had a conversation with her. And I think that openness, because you were open with her, because you were very straightforward with her, it was able to help her push past everything she was being thrown at school.
Yeah.
And now she can be who she wants to be, and she can be it in front of you. And that's the greatest thing about a parent-child relationship, because it doesn't matter what sexuality, it doesn't matter what race, what species, like, as long as you have that interaction and that trust with your offspring, that's going to be the world.
Yeah, I've seen a major difference too since she came out than before, because she's been bullied for a while. But now she comes home and she's like, she used to come home and she was, I've been bullied all day, and she was really distraught. But since coming out and having that confidence in our relationship and the family and whatnot, she comes home and she's like, they bullied me today, but I really don't care. I'm going to be who I am.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is very amazing.
It's a huge relief to me as a mom, because I was really worried about how this was all going to play out. And
it's honestly the same thing that happens, not to the same extent, obviously, from my end, but the type of person that I was in middle school was a bullied nerd who didn't fit in. It's not the same thing as a sexuality, but it's still an ostracized class of people. As soon as I got to high school, that stopped mattering, because at high school I became so comfortable in my skin that I was just like, yes, I play card games, and you can fuck off.
right.
It's kind of one of those things that once you realize that there's nothing wrong with you, you're not different and there's something wrong. You're different and that's fine. As soon as you get to come to grips with that, the peace of mind that you get from that gives you a much better shield against some of the ass things you can deal with in the world.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I do want to address a question in the chat from White Ferret. They ask, transgender individuals face increased risks of violence. Is this a risk factor for kids? I would say yes and no. Risk factor is in bullying, but not as in like somebody's going to shoot the child because they want to be someone else. And there's actually, from what I've seen in the part of the LGBT community that I am in, the transition as a child isn't necessarily a transition. It's more of like, do you want to wear My Little Pony? Wear My Little Pony. And there is that risk factor that you run, and that happens, and it's shitty, because there's no reason a trans person should feel like they're going to get shot if they decide
I'd say
to
if
go.
if because of who you are, like if you are not harming somebody, and because of who you are, you feel like people are going to attack you, or people do, because sometimes that does happen. If that happens, it's not you as the individual who needs to conform to society's norms at that point. It's society that needs to realize that you're still a thinking, living, breathing human being and need to treat you that way.
There's another way to read that question, though, because it also mentions supporting trans individuals having custody. So it could also be a question about, with the trans parents having a child, would that there being their parents cause an increased risk of violence to that child?
I addressed that with the bullying, but I can go in more depth on that. I had a friend, and I specifically bring this up because I knew them personally and because I was very involved in their life. They had a parent that dressed in drag and then started going through a transition. And what happened was my friend, the child involved, and this was in middle school, started getting bullied. Words, they're hard.
You're fine.
So the child started getting bullied. There is no reason that child should have been bullied.
Oh, absolutely
No
not.
reason. And I was always called a carpet muncher. I'm pansexual. I like everything. I'm pansexual, panromantic. As long as you're nice looking and you're nice to me, you got a good chance.
Yeah, that's what happened about 2 years ago.
Anyway, I was always called a carpet muncher, so I kind of understood how it felt to be bullied. So I walked up to this individual, and this is very early in our friendship, and when I realized that she was being bullied for her parent being in a transition, I had to step in, because most children don't get that step in from their peers. Most children don't try and like deal with the bullies. They just kind of retreat into themselves and kind of live not at all. They just kind of go through the motions of life. But after my intervention with that friend, they started getting bullied less and less, mainly because I was a butch ass bitch in middle school and high school. Like, I got some stories of just me whooping ass because somebody was getting bullied and I stepped in. Because, like, I'm pretty strong. Like, I can lift Cirrus.
I've seen it. She can do it.
So,
Wow, there's my mute button. And I can lift the Godless Iowan and give him a piggyback ride, so he's not as big as he thinks he is.
It's true. I've seen that as well. That's something I can't unsee at this point.
He said I couldn't do it. I told him he was lying.
moving on to our next topic is LGBT relationships. So the first instance of a marriage lawsuit for same-sex couples was in 1970. Little fun fact. And it was in 2005 in Obergefell v. Hodge that ensured the same-sex couples in all 50 states have the right to legally get married and have their marriages recognized in every state. I still see people with signs and posts on Twitter that just shit all over the fact that gays can get married.
Mm-hmm. Why does it bother them so much? I just don't get
If they're
it.
thinking
Right?
so much about what's happening in the bedroom of people who are gay, maybe there's a chance that they're thinking a little too much on it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, all you'd have to do is look at their internet search history, and you would, it would be revealing, I'm sure.
That's okay. We don't want to reveal anything about Matt Powell or Steven Anderson now, wouldn't we? Especially now that I know they watch my channel.
I don't understand it either. Like, anyone should be able to get married. Like, I told, this is going to be delving into you and I a little bit. Me and this dude over here, wherever I am. Okay, so
you're over there. Chat's up there.
Okay,
Yes,
cool.
Sir.
Somewhere.
This camera. This is weird.
So Cirrus and I have discussed like what we want to do, how we want to officiate our relationships, how we want to move forward in our life. And one of that includes a ceremony, not necessarily a wedding, because Cirrus doesn't want the government getting involved in our wedding. And I'm cool with that, because, he doesn't want the government to get involved. That's fine. As long as I get to wear a dress and walk down an aisle, I'm good. And I told my best friend that if I wasn't married, oh, that was a dog. Oh.
I heard a happy pupper.
So
things just got rough. That was a horrible joke, wasn't it?
But I told my best friend, who I won't name for obvious reasons, she's a female, and I said, by 30, if I'm not legally married, I got you. I'll marry you. It'll be fine. I just, I can't wrap my head around the fact that there are people that would have the gall to show up at that and tell me that I was going to burn in some hell because I wanted to marry my best friend.
Well,
Ugh.
On top of that, you've also got people like I've had people in my comment section like spew that, oh, the homosexuals are the new sacred cows of the United States, and why do we have to put them on a pedestal? I'm like, first of all, there's so much wrong with what you just said, and I don't want to point it all out because it's not worth my time. Secondly, please stop speaking on the internet.
Yeah, right? That's the thing is like the way societies have kind of pushed everyone who is in the LGBT community down to the lowest of the lowest tier, then of course we're going to try to bring them up. That's the whole point. We want to normalize it because it is normal. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, it's called egalitarianism. It's fairly freaking normal.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's not like we're exalting people above others. We're just trying to bring them up to the same level. Which
Yeah,
they.
sorry about the door.
It's okay. It happens.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just why? Just why? Why do people act the way they do about things?
Question of all questions, isn't it?
I've always had this just kind of... I don't know what it is, and it bothers me that I don't think I will ever really know the answer to this question. Whether or not the homophobia comes from the individual first, like, you know, it's taught systemically in some way, shape, or form, or whether or not it stems from the religion. Because at least here in America, and in a lot of places like in the Middle East, almost all of it stems from the predominant religion of those areas. But sometimes I wonder, is it necessarily just that, or is it just how those people were raised, or something else? Because I know that especially in the atheist community, it's really easy for us to just point and go, see, religion teaches homophobia. That's true in some senses and not true in others. So sometimes I just wonder, you know, at what point does this person pull their beliefs from a bag of beliefs and that's why they're homophobic? Or at what point do we find that they're homophobic just because they're homophobic? Like, what caused this individual to be that way? Then
Yeah,
again,
I don't think you're going to be able to pinpoint one reason why. I think that it's one of those things where it's complex, you know. You can
Well, I
point to a number of different variables that
Yeah.
lead
and
people into that direction.
And I mean, religions did kind of reflect a certain morality and sense of the time and place. So
Not
even
to
if it
mention on
was
top
the
of that, not to mention on top of that, you have the social structure of where you live in the United States, because we're specifically speaking about the United States in reference to the ACLU, which is where they're located. But when you're referencing societal norms versus change, because let's face it, there was a big shift, and it wasn't like the gays just magically appeared. They had always been there. They just couldn't be there.
Mhm.
And with the outcropping of more and more support for the LGBTQ plus community, that the best way to describe it is that the societal norms changed. And they changed for the worse because it wasn't, you know, if you saw two dudes hanging out, it was okay because, you know, they probably weren't gay, but like, it's not your business. Now it's those two guys are gay in their own home. I can't believe that they would do such a thing in an area that has children. And
Any of the token your mom statements of the time, it's kind of like we're going, you know, one step forward, two steps back, and inching our way toward, you know, being normal, right? As far as being accepted by society. So I mean, I think we have a long way to go, and it's going to be a hard fight. It's always been
well, it's the same fight that happened with racism and how, and I don't want to equate it to, you know, a stick is a stick, an apple is an apple. No, these are two completely separate issues, but they relate in one another to how the society has treated them
Mhm.
and how it's shifting.
Yeah,
Because
and
we're seeing the same shift that happened with, you know, African Americans getting rights, getting, all of these different things. We saw it in the movement for women. We saw women's rights movements. Now we're seeing it with the gay movement.
I mean,
Now
there's
we're
still 12 states that have anti-sodomy laws.
Yep.
yeah.
Texas is one of them. But I mean, at the end of the day, we are talking about civil rights, right? These are human beings, and we're talking about their civil rights. And also, another parallel is the way the institutions react to the LGBT community, the way the schools, the governments, the courts, everything. So I can see the parallels with that as well.
Ironically enough, it's great that you brought that up, because the next and final point that I have on my list is trans and LGBTQ plus people and the law, specifically identification and discrimination. So there is, it's still an issue, but it's not as big as an issue as it was beforehand. When a transgender person gets pulled over and their ID says one thing and they are a different thing. They are legally not the same person as they are on their license or ID. And at that point, they are arrested because they have false identification.
Oh, you're kidding. Oh my god, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah,
Really?
I didn't either. What the?
Holy
Why?
shit. Okay.
Why would you arrest? No, just.
So the biggest example of this is when you're going through a transition and you're finished with your transition, you look different. If you don't update your IDs, or if you don't update your driver's license, if you don't update anything, it can and will affect you, whether it's, showing a store ID to get alcohol, it's a security guard, a TSA agent, a policeman. If it doesn't match up with how you look, the gender, the height, the weight, and even the height and weight doesn't really matter, but sometimes it can, because they factor that into your picture and everything.
I mean, if you consider that somebody, so like for me, I haven't updated my license in a year and a half. Most people don't. Most people will update their license, around the time that the expiration date is coming up. So let's say that you're in a transition, and you're female, you're transitioning to male, so you're on T. Has anybody here seen what somebody looks like after a year on T? When they're supposed to, they do not look like
completely different.
They do not look like the same individual. They don't.
Like, it's completely different. And then when you get pulled over and you haven't had a chance to update your state and government identification, it's considered identity fraud or identity theft.
That is ridiculous.
And you can and will get arrested for it, and then they have to do a blood test, and they have to ensure that you're the right person. And at that point, it's still up in the air on whether or not you'll get hit with identity fraud, because you're still not technically the same person, because your license is different
nothing
than you.
clever. Just
And
showing
at that
some
point,
love
it's
to a great
just up in
channel
the air
and
to whether or
cause.
not that policeman takes pity on you, or if it goes to court. Because most of the times, from the research that I've done, the court does go in favor of the trans person, because obviously, if they're just
When it's a human rights issue, eventually, a lot of times the court will even look and, like with the sodomy laws, they'll go and say, this is a blue book issue. It's archaic.
Yeah.
It's here, but it's gone.
I have to be very I can't help but be very concerned about this when thinking about certain states that have just ridiculous methods when it comes to actually getting this stuff updated. Because my brother has been wanting to transition, has been trying to. Moved here from Missouri. Over in Missouri, he was going to have to go into a courtroom and prove that it wasn't going to do any harm to change his name.
What? Why is that a thing that you have? So let's say, for instance, first of all, I have a super chat that I want to get out real quick. Event Horizon for $20. I've got nothing clever, just showing some love to a great channel and cause. Thank you, Event Horizon. That means a lot to me. I would be more animated, but I think I've covered why my animation's dead, which is funny because I'm normally hiding behind a cartoon avatar. Haha. But no, it's like, for me, or functionally, this is like the conversation we have with Deconverted Man. How much social cost is there to you referring to somebody by their proper name, not their given name? the name that they prefer. Like, for instance, I think everybody on the planet knows that Aaron Ra, his birth name was not Aaron Ra. But
Right.
that is his preferred name. That is his chosen name. That is the name that we all know him by. That's the name that we call him. Everybody who knows me knows that there's probably like 3 people left on this planet who call me Chris. Practically every.
I am one of them.
Yeah, it's like you and like a few family members, and that's practically it. Almost everybody else has moved to Sirs because I've been using that name since I was 10 years old, and it's the name that I've taken for myself. If I were to legally change it, aside from the few people who I'd say, no, you've known me as Chris for X amount of years, go ahead and keep that name, it's yours. Aside from that, what would the actual downsides be? Like, what harm would there be for me changing my name? The answer is there would be none. There's no harm. Nobody would care. It would change a few documents, and that's it.
Even
would
if
you-
it was a real change, like still, how is there harm involved
Well, exactly.
to anybody else?
Well,
because
that's-
you change your name.
Well, that's
How would
the
you
reason.
even
Well, okay, hold on.
demonstrate that?
So hold on. White Ferret does bring up a very good point. However, I would like to give pros and cons for it. White Ferret says, proving you're not hiding from warrants, debt, or any other factors. Many states require a court for a name change, which is why they do that. However, I would point out that when you're asked what's the harm in changing your name, and they want you to give an actual, like, yes, this isn't going to harm anyone, why would my name harm anyone?
Not to
Is
mention,
my grandma going to have a heart attack because I decided to call my name Bobby?
like right now, at least in Georgia, a legal name change is about $100 and a few pieces of paperwork. That's it. That's all it is. So,
Well,
changing the law specifically for people who are changing their gendered name, that I see no pragmatic difference between changing your name for gendered reasons or changing your name for literally any other possible reason.
yeah, we looked into the
There
name
really
change
isn't.
stuff in our state, and it cost around roughly $500-$600. And you have to also check in with Social Security and all these other
Yeah,
different.
but you guys
agencies.
live in Iowa. Your only export is cow fertilizer.
Things tend to be cheaper here, though. These comparative to Texas. Let's just be frank there. But I mean, you have to go through all these different institutions to even get your name legally changed, and I don't see why anything that was on your record wouldn't automatically be dealt with in that process.
Because they're
And-
very bad at that.
And I don't see how the hell you could possibly prove something like that in a courtroom, other than just I don't have any records. I don't know. That's really confusing to me.
But as far as having to go through all those other places, a big part of that's just that they aren't very good at getting everything updated.
Yeah, I can see that.
I mean,
Bureaucracy, right?
Just simply, so my wife, not legally my wife, but my wife, got married, and naturally that caused her last name to change. And she's on some paperwork for me because of things.
Mhm.
And we spent years fighting to get them to update her name, to get her maiden name switched to her new name, just from that, something that's that common. So yeah, it's unfortunately just a mess.
It is very much a difficult thing to do, especially when you have marriages involved, when you have a transition involved, when there's something that is not a consistent thing. So like a wife, a husband, when you have somebody else in the picture, it's much harder to do anything. On top of the fact that you run the risk of all of the fines that come with identity fraud, all of the jail time, the court hearings, it's just a fucking mess, man. Like, I can't wrap my head around the fact that, like, I want to change my name legally to Raziel. I love my mom. I love the fact that she gave me the name that she did. I don't like it. I want to change my name to Raziel. I like that name 1,000 times better. For me to do that, I would have to go to court. I would have to get papers. I would have to come up with the $100 fine.
I think it's about
$150.
$100 here in Georgia, something like that. Is what we looked up when we looked it up last.
And that's just a chance to get your name changed. That's not guaranteeing that at the end of it your name will be changed.
But what kills me about it is like combining that with then they can turn around and arrest you for identity fraud, for having the stuff that would have been on your records from before, because that would have been the original. For not having the identification changed to a new name.
Yeah, you have to go through the whole process, pay for whatever legal fees you'd have to pay.
That's so stupid.
Yep.
And it's even worse for trans people because they have to pay for the therapy leading up to them even getting approved for it. Then they get approved for it. Then they have to pay for the medicine. And then they have to pay for the surgeries. And then on top of that, they have to pay for their name changes.
And all these different steps having risks of any of these steps having somebody arrest you for fraud because of literally just not being updated fast enough. Well, there's a process that keeps you from updating it faster.
Yep.
So stupid.
Yeah, and that's not something that that's not something that like a white cis male would have to go through. I mean, that's just...
It's not something that...
I take offense to that as a white cis male.
you totally should.
Oh, yeah. But it's not something that any cis person's going to have to go through for that particular reason.
Mm-hmm.
White or not, male or not.
So it's de facto discrimination.
Yeah,
it really is. On top of when they're doing all of this, they say that they're keeping you safe. They want to make sure that your identity is not being stolen, whatever. It's difficult to try and reason your way out of the fact that somebody is going out of their way to put you in a position of, if let's say you're getting arrested on the road, you get pulled over, maybe your backlight's out, something that like Surus would just get off with like a warning, right? But if I was in the middle of a transition and my driver's license didn't look like me because I was in the middle of a transition, it's going to be infinitely more difficult for me to get out of that ticket and for me to be able to do anything, whereas he would just get off with nothing. Like, I would get sent to jail, I would get arrested, my car would get towed, I would have to pay fees on top of fees, go to court, I would have to pay a ticket. I would have to pay all of those things because...
And I could almost understand the start of that process for the fact that it doesn't match. Like, they're looking at this and it doesn't look like the same person at all. But then to have it continue like that, to be able to make it into a full-blown legal problem rather than just be like, oh, this doesn't make sense, we're going to take you in and check this stuff. And then, oh, it came back fine? No, that would be one thing, but to...
Yeah.
And not to mention, honestly, it's... Maybe this is just my thought process, but... So, one of the things that our taxes goes into, or one of the things that our taxes go into, is paying the workers and accountants who work with all the documentation for all the citizens in the United States. That's why we have local census data. That's why we have anything that's sitting under that umbrella. So it's very strange to me that it would be so terribly inconvenient to change these documents where, in an age where I can go into an Excel file and change one thing across 1,000 servers in a single click, it would seem very odd to me if it was not that easy for our government to do the same. It shouldn't be anywhere near as difficult as they like to make it out to be. When again, it should be as easy as a couple of clicks in a system, and it should update everything all across. And then it should be up to you to notify people like your credit company and stuff like that, where you have to do that personally.
Well, I would say it probably should be quite a bit easier than it is, but at the same time, that would require that they actually communicate and keep this information together, which they don't seem to be doing.
I mean, if anybody's a fan of green text stories, that's basically the entire basis behind the Adobe Reader, Reader story.
They should be keeping the stuff together like this, but it seems like it's pretty obvious that aren't.
They're not.
I would also like to point out a story from the chat that was just shared with us from Lisa. Apparently, she was sleeping in a convenience store parking lot in a rural commuting, and she hadn't been they hadn't been transitioning that long. The cops apparently opened her door, detained her, searched her car, questioned her about all of her meds, and it was a consensus of, we don't like your kind, don't come back.
That's awful.
All because, and I can attest that Cirrus and I have slept in our car in Walmart parking lots, in Kroger parking lots.
Yeah, we had a stint before we moved into this apartment. There was a good chunk of time where we were homeless, so the only place that we slept was in the car. That's what we did. We went to work, and we would go to work, we'd grab fast food, and then we'd sleep in the car, and that was our day, constantly. So it was... Luckily here in Georgia, there's no legal ramifications for sleeping in your car. That's perfectly legal. And we were never touched in any parking lot of any kind. Never at all. So it's upsetting to hear that there are circumstances where people have been completely harassed for doing something that to me should just be legal.
Well, think about it, right? Like, we were homeless, we had no money, we had nothing that we could do. We were in the same situation as Lisa, it seems, at least for that moment. It took several weeks. Like, I had gotten asked a couple of times by security people in Kroger, because I was sitting in the Kroger sushi area that we have. I would sit there for hours waiting for Cirrus to get off work and come get me, and they would ask me why I was there. They wouldn't search me. They wouldn't ask me for ID. They wouldn't do anything like that. And that's really where it hits, is because they see someone who doesn't quite look female and doesn't quite look male. So they're like, oh, ambiguous. I'm going to check their ID. And it causes so much problems, because if you are homeless, if you don't have any money, and you are, sleeping out of your car, being detained, having those fees, your car's detained, now you're really homeless.
Yeah, I don't know how it is in any other state, but here what happens whenever you get pulled, they say, okay, well, since we're grabbing you legally can't drive your car anywhere. So we're going to have to pull your car into detainment, and we're going to have to pull your license. So you're going to have to pay to get that reinstated. You're going to have to pay to get your car out of the compound, and your insurance is going to take a hit, so you're going to be paying more per month after you do this. That's what any traffic violation looks like here.
Yes and no. Yes and no. There are some places in Georgia where they will allow you to contact somebody within 30 minutes of you to come and get your car.
Yeah, I sincerely wish that was something that they had let me do.
Right?
That would have been great.
Because Cirrus,
that's a story that's not related to this.
What Cirrus and I agree on is the fact that it's so mind-blowing that instead of being able to sit down and help this person that's obviously homeless, obviously has no money, obviously can't afford this, instead of helping them, they just think of them as another number, and it harms the view of LGBTQ people versus society, because then society is all like, oh, we don't like you because you think you're privileged. And the LGBTQ community is like, no, we're a minority.
They're like, no, we've been stepped on for years. We're not the exact opposite of privileged. Well, you guys have been stepped on for years. I'm saying we, hypothetically. I'm not.
Well, you're still part of the LGBTQ plus community. You're in the plus, you're the A, ally.
Well, yes, but I still would not consider that me as LGBTQ, because I don't want to be that asshole that appropriates that entire conversation. It's not mine.
One thing that really worries me about all of this is, yes, you have people that are homeless and things like that, but what really is aggravating for me now is seeing this administration kind of strip away these rights, and also protecting quote-unquote religious rights. So basically, you can have employers or even hospitals deny people aid or deny people jobs
because religious preference.
Yeah, because they have a religion that goes against or thinks that being LGBT is wrong. And
Yeah.
I mean, that it's just this cycle of poverty that you end up in. If you can't get a job, you can't get a home. If you get arrested, you don't have a car, and then you can't look for a job, and yada yada. It just continues, and no wonder the suicide rates are as high as they are.
Right, and I do want to address something before we start to close out, because we do have to get a roommate of ours to work. Black Stuff that says, I thought A stood for asexual. The full terminology for LGBTQ is LGBTQQIAAP, or lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, transsexual, queer, questioning, intersex, asexual, ally, and pansexual. So that's the full rundown of it. There are two A's in
It
it.
depends on which A you're looking at that point.
Yeah.
And if you are the godless Iowan and as homosexual as he is, then you look at a lot of A.
Oh my.
But stuff, Jim.
With that being said, I think that closes out our conversation. Is there any last things that you ladies want to say?
I'm just really glad to be having this conversation. I mean,
I'd say
really.
we've probably got a good 10 minutes where we can address questions from the audience still, if they have any questions specifically for Mrs. Snarky and Lady Unicorn,
Or myself.
or you too.
Yeah.
Like I'm here as the body that has the channel that we're on, and that's basically the only capacity I'm here in.
You've lended
Yeah.
your platform out.
Do not ask Cirrus any questions.
Do not-
Also, if you guys want to see more of me on the channel, any more of LGBTQ plus things related, and have me with it, please feel free to let us know in the chat, because I would love to be back on here. I would love to have another podcast, especially with Lady Unicorn and Mrs. Snarky, and anyone else that would like to join in on the conversation, because I think that this isn't talked about enough, and both of you who are part of the community didn't even know that if you get carded while in transition, you could go to jail.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean-
unfortunately for me, wasn't something I was looking at doing, but it was something that I have family looking at. Yeah, my whole thing is just the fact that I have two significant others, one male and one female, so
Yeah.
it's relatively accepted in comparison.
Like I think that it's majorly overlooked. I think people look at the LGBTQ plus community and all they think of is the pride. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
Pride Week. Oh, yes. Asexual Week. Please, more. Yes.
And frequently, if they're not part of the community, they'll look at it and they'll only look at like a big city that has practically fetish individuals, and they'll act like that is everything. Whereas here in Southern Illinois, Carbondale just this year had their first actual Pride Parade.
Yeah.
And that's not even a conservative area. That's actually a liberal area in a more conservative overall part of the country, because Southern Illinois, closer to Kentucky and that, but still, this whole time, that was the first time they've ever had one.
And it's crazy when you have those types of Pride days, because no one knows what the fuck to do. They're just like, yes, I am the gay. I hope I don't get shot.
Remember, guys, if the gay agenda is real, I sincerely hope it is, because the decorating in here is horrible, and I would sincerely like some interior decorating help. And I think that's probably the most important part of the gay agenda, if it is real.
I think the only gay agenda that every LGBTQ plus person can agree on is just consent.
Yeah, that's a very important thing.
I would say that's probably just an important part of being a human being, if you'd like to be a good human being.
Like, I don't know if any of you have like a huge group of like strictly LGBTQ friends that you hang out with, but I used to have this group that I would go hang out with at the mall, and we had this one kid who loved giving everybody like hugs and kisses, and he was pan romantic, pansexual. He wanted all of it. He wanted to touch everyone. Oh my God. He would go, "Hey, can I hug you? Can I kiss you? Can I touch you? Are you sure? Are you sure? Can I touch you? Okay. I'm gonna touch you now." Like, he was so into consent. Like, you had to say it like 6 separate times in 6 separate languages. Because he
Also-
wanted to be sure.
Also, for Smithy in the chat, consent is not the main idea behind gay activism. It is equal rights. She was just saying that that is one thing that everybody in the LGBTQ community can agree on. Or if there was a gay
Because
agenda,
there-
it would be consent.
Like,
That's not the same thing as the...
No.
That's not the same thing as saying that the main idea behind activism is that, no. Consent is its own thing that needs
Yeah.
to be had in all aspects. I
Yeah.
think there was a wonderful analogy about tea that explained consent very well, that I wish I remembered it.
Oh, the one where you don't pour it in if somebody's unconscious. You don't pour tea in their mouth.
It's like, would you like some tea? No, I would not like some tea. Okay, then you don't give them tea. If you would not give them tea, you do not give them the sex. Also, I somebody mentioned something about Jilly Juice, so I guess if Jilly Juice did what she said it did, then I would imagine if somebody, like for me, if I were homosexual, it would end up being something like this. Let's pretend that this is Jilly Juice. I would take a drink. I like vagina now. That is probably...
That's totally
Alrighty,
legit.
and with that note, I think we're done here. I think someone needs to gift Cirrus taking a drink, and you do not give the sex, Cirrus 2018, and I think we're good here.
Soundbite. Somebody make that a soundbite thing.
Secular will, that's what he does.
Oh, secular's wonderful for
So-
that.
So with that said, if anybody here would like to see more of either Lady Unicorn or Mrs. Snarky, you have two options. You can either let us know in the comment section below if you'd like to see them on the channel again. On top of that, both of their channels are linked in the description as well. If you'd like to see more of Pam, you can also let us know in the comment section below. And when she uploads a third video, I'll go ahead and retroactively put her channel in the description.
Alrighty, thank you guys so much.
Oh, it
Thank
was
you for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us. This has been a great conversation, and I'm sad that it's ending, but I know that it has to at some point. So, but
I
yes,
wish we had more time, but we gotta get our roommate Walker to work.
we'll definitely have to do this again.
Oh, definitely. We can talk with Cirrus and see if he can put us on a podcast.
Cool.
Yep, I'll see what we can do. Basically, any one of those times that Ocean is not able to make it, I'll just be like, hey guys, you want to do a thing?
And we could just call it like the Hammered Out Panda Podcast.
No, it's still going to be part of the regular podcast. It's not a subsection.
Right.
That
Well,
means you're more prominent.
Can we still get hammered?
If you'd like to get hammered, that's fine. But I think I'm the only one in this entire chat that
Yeah.
doesn't drink.
Oh,
No,
Okay.
you're not the
I'm
only one.
out.
who doesn't-
I
Oh,
love you
dear.
both. I will see you all later. I gotta take Walker to work.
See you guys.